I've got your picture, I'm coming with you, dear Maria, count me in. Welcome back to Silent Hill 2, a game I hold close to my heart. If you are watching this, hopefully you checked out the first playthrough in its entirety or are an experienced Silent Hill fan. The first playthrough was wandering around each corner of the town that I could reach, in addition to trying to hold back spoilers. As I am a bit of a rambler, with this New Game Plus playthrough, I will be talking over the game about some of the elements I find interesting, or little tidbits that help make the bigger picture more clear. But an important note, the information I'm explaining can be incorrect, though it is a combination of my personal interpretations of the story, what I've learned from more experienced YouTubers like Max Darrett, Nub Zombie, and plenty of pages of lore from the ever-popular, most of the time correct, Silent Hill Wiki. So naturally, spoilers abound, and not necessarily reflecting the current moment of the game. As well, as this game takes a lot of inspiration from Adrian Lyne's Jacob's Ladder, starring Tim Robbins, I will be giving spoilers for that movie as well. Firstly, James Sunderland met his soon-to-be wife, Mary Shepard, at a party where they were introduced to each other and fell in love. After they were wed, they took a vacation to Silent Hill, visiting the Historical Society and looked upon the Crimson and White Banquet for the Gods painting, spent the whole day by the lake, and enjoyed a stay at the Lakeview Hotel. Never saying exactly what caused the disease, whether it was melanoma, something supernatural infecting her, or what I believe to be the case is as the 67 ill now sleep beneath the lake, and Brookhaven being built in response to the epidemic in the past, that being near the water could have gave her something. The main character of Silent Hill Homecoming shares a last name of Shepard, but it's unconfirmed that they are related. But in a promotional diary before the game came out, Alex hears about Mary and wonders if he's related to her. But I wouldn't count on that, especially because that game focuses heavily on family and bloodlines, and they don't mention her in the actual game itself. When they return to Ashfield after their vacation, which is the location of the fourth game, The Room, that's about a day and some change distance away, Mary became bedridden and quite ill from the disease. Mary was taken to St. Jerome's Hospital in town, and the doctor who could not place the disease determined that there was no known cure for her condition and at best had about 3 years to live. Her disease degraded her skin and made her feel like a monster, which with that and knowing that she's going to die, caused her to lash out and take her anger out on James. From this, James visited Mary less and less, and drank a lot more to cope with the situation. Not to mention the loneliness and lack of affection sunk in more as time went on, including sexual repression of not being able to touch or make love to his wife like they used to, especially because their relationship was full of passion in the early years. Mary developed suicidal depression with her life ticking down and the pain of the disease, but her happy place in her mind was always Silent Hill. While staying at St. Jerome's, Mary met another patient, an orphan named Laura, and they would talk, develop a friendship, and would tell Laura stories and show pictures of Silent Hill. They both shared a nurse at the hospital in Ashfield, Rachel, whom you can find her nurse outfit in the apartment in South Ashfield Heights in the fourth game. An important note, however, the Rachel mentioned in Silent Hill 2 by Laura is spelled Rachel, while the one referred to in 4 is spelled with a second A after the H. This could naturally imply it's a different Rachel, or that they just went with a different spelling and development, but we do know both Rachels are nurses, so, you know. You can also find James's father, Frank Sunderland, who is the superintendent of the apartments. When James would visit Les, Laura would comfort Mary, and Mary had harsh things to say about him, which certainly influenced Laura's feelings towards the man that she did not meet until they ran into each other at Woodside Apartments. As time went on, Mary's condition worsened, and she wrote a letter for Laura, letting her know that she would be passing on in a sensitive way, and expressed that she wanted to adopt Laura if she had the chance. But of course, as we know, Laura has kind of misinterpreted some of the letter, thinking that Mary must be at Silent Hill, because she talked about it all the time. She also wrote a letter trying to express her truest feelings with James, and gave both letters to Rachel to give to the respective persons after she passed on. But Mary was allowed to return home for the last end of her life in Ashfield, so that she could spend her last days with James. I believe when James took Mary home, he was also given the letter that was read by Mary at the end of the game, but it also could depend on what your ending of the game is when you receive your letter.
Thanks.
Because regardless, it's going to have Mary or Maria handing the letter at the end. Whether he read the letter before Mary died or right after, the letter he has throughout the game is more of a projection that his mind conjured with the help of the town and not the physical one. Depending on the ending, it's either Mary or Maria who gives James a real letter, but no matter what, James had read the letter before, and his mental state blocked out the rest of the details of it, causing him to believe there was even a chance that Mary could be in Silent Hill.
I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous.
Now, it's also possible to interpret it as Silent Hill, although really far away from Ashfield, possibly helped him project that letter in his mind so that he would come to Silent Hill in the first place, because the town, quote-unquote, calls people who have darkness in their hearts. The stress and burden of taking care of his dying wife did take a great toll on James, who already was deeply depressed by the whole situation, the lack of confidence and self-respect getting worse. Watching his wife suffer as she did, knowing there was no cure, and overall missing the past they used to have, the life they led, James kissed his wife's head and smothered her with a pillow as both a mercy killing and trying to have some semblance of his own life again. James has complicated grief, depression, and suicidal thoughts after his wife passes on, which causes him to block out the true events of what has just happened. He does remember the opening of the letter, and with the inability to accept the situation, he perceives that maybe, just maybe, his wife could still be alive in Silent Hill, where they used to vacation. Refusing to accept what has happened, James places Mary's corpse in the backseat of his car and travels about a day or so's journey to Silent Hill in Toluca County, mentally blocking out the knowledge that Mary is in the car and what James has done. In particular of this game, as I mentioned, the town of Silent Hill calls upon people that have darkness in their hearts, regrets, sins, etc., and compels them to confront their past and current mental states. The town, as described in the Book of Memories, expresses that Silent Hill, whose original name is lost to time, but was once called the Land of Silent Spirits, and some variants of that, is filled with not only spectral energy of ancestors, but of the spirits of nature, the wind, the water, and so on. These factors give the town its own emotional significance, and from all the darkness that's occurred in the town with the colonists clearing out the population, the Civil War prison, the occult religions, and pain and sorrow that's taken place in the town, it has warped how the land used to be. Once a place where the mental and emotional could manifest in a positive way, it's created darkness and evil, particularly through the subconscious of those who reside or wander through it. The town had issues piling up, but when Alessa was used in the Order's ritual to try and birth God and harness her powers for their benefit, that's when the Fog World especially anchored on the location, pulling certain individuals into this dreamlike world. There's more to be said about the Fog World and the Other World, particularly with Valtiel, a character introduced in the third game, but for now, what's important to know is a passage that can be found in the 1999 guidebook for the first game. For the sake of convenience, this will be referred to as the right side and reverse side in this book. In the same way that a person normally repeats REM sleep and non-REM sleep in regular cycles while he or she is dreaming, when the nightmare world approaches a deeper darkness, sleep, a phenomenon occurs in which light is almost completely taken away and the world shifts in an ever-deepening nightmare as the cycle shifts again. As for the right side and the reverse side, in short, it isn't that one is reality and that the one is a dream. The fact is that neither is reality. Which, when we go to Brookhaven Hospital in this game, one of the doctors mentions that there's a patient that is kind of lost between our reality and his reality. But he's at least physically still there in the hospital. Or perhaps that memo is just a note that James finds to kind of understand what he's going through. This game is up to a lot of interpretation for some things, and I could be wrong when I say that for some issues, but for right now, let's just go with that. In the Book of Lost Memories, there's also a passage that reads, "The mist can also be interpreted as the thoughts of the dead rising up from the lake and settling over the town." Silent Hill's power is not inherently evil, but depending on the darkness or light of the character, the town transforms the experience there accordingly. Which is why the first game has Alessa being the sole contributor of the town's darkness with how powerful she is. And in this game, why James, Eddie, and Angela see a different town than what Laura does, which is nothing unusual for her. She just sees Silent Hill, but not our Silent Hill. I firmly believe that the town is not trying to kill its inhabitants or visitors, but is instead fueled by their darkness, and also tries to help those who are tormented in some way. After all, the protagonists in all games tend to find objects they need in the most unreasonable places, like finding ammo and health kits and ampoules in a school, or a shotgun in a hospital, the key of Belthor in a sealed bag of jelly beans, light bulbs in a sealed metal can, or in the third game, cracking open a walnut to find a moonstone that lets you progress. Same with rooms of regular buildings changing to resemble those of the character controlling the plot's memories, or even the hundreds upon hundreds of locked doors in the Silent Hill universe. The rooms and objects are linked to memories that help us see the bigger picture, and on top of that, prevent us from wasting our time by going into hundreds of rooms that have no bearing on us. Unless you believe that someone in the fog and other worlds going around smashing every lock and jamming them, so we have to find another way, which there's plenty of blunt objects in the series to do that, I'm gonna chalk that up to Silent Hill saying, "Come on, man. Let's progress." And, oh, deal with the monsters that come from the deepest pits of your mind. Are you going to confront them by bashing their brains out? Or are you simply going to outrun them and their symbolism? In the basic version of Silent Hill, it'd be hard to imagine these things existing in general in these ways. And yet, they are the instruments of survival and progress in a mystifying world, blending reality and dreams and dark subconscious thoughts. With that preface, we continue the story. As James arrives into town, he battles with his suicidal thoughts, contemplating killing himself in the lake, but takes a moment to reflect in the mirror in the opening cutscene, battling his own mind on what's truly real, even if he is real. But he gets a hold of himself, and starts traveling through the town, where the main road is blocked, and forces him to travel to the graveyard, where he runs into another tormented soul, Angela. Angela has a lot of issues she's going through. Severe long-term depression, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, social anxiety, and even body dysmorphic disorder, which has contributed to her being suicidal. Even her doctor only prescribed her drugs to deal with this, which ended up having nightmarish side effects for her. After Angela graduated from high school, she fled from home, but her dad illegally dragged her back home as she must have been at least 18 in Maine. And shortly after, she took a kitchen knife and killed not only her father, but her brother. Being in a state of emotional turmoil afterwards due to being the target of a murder investigation with no one to turn to and nowhere else to go, Angela was called to Silent Hill in order to try to find her missing mother, her final hope. When we do find her, she's looking for her mother's grave for closure, and James converses with her, being informed the town is dangerous. Despite this, and for his own well-being in the state he's in, James will go into town either way to achieve his goals, and wishes Angela luck. It is at this point that we will talk about the red squares. Throughout the game, including on the mouths of creatures and in locations like at the bottom of the well, we find the red squares. Throughout the game, including on the mouths of creatures and in locations like at the bottom of the well, we find the red squares. The Silent Hill franchise, at least the Team Silent games, involve concepts and principles of alchemy. The first game is heavily based on alchemy, being a metaphoric journey to go through hell and forge enlightenment by the end of the game, with symbols of alchemy throughout, and even Harry's last name, Mason, meaning stone, like in the Philosopher's Stone. With alchemy, there is the potential of having lesser materials transcend into greater materials, like lead into gold. And the idea of making a Philosopher's Stone that could bring immortality, though this could only be done by one who could do the impossible and master both the elements and the soul. The squares can be interpreted as the concept of squaring the circle or doing the impossible, and with bringing the subconscious into the consciousness, trying to bring to light the repressed truth within James. When he looks at the square the first time, he states that it feels like someone is groping around inside his skull. And not long after this, he starts to see monsters that have a connection one can make to his wife. By the end of the game, James comes across 9 squares together, that both represent the 9 types of monsters he has and shall come across on his psychological journey to find the inner truth of what he did to Mary, and his own feelings that need to be explored. And it is also a representation of all the repression and delusions finally coming to light. The truth is clear now. The first of these creatures we encounter is the lying figure. They are a physical manifestation of the memory of his sick wife on her deathbed and his internal suffering, taking the appearance of a hospital patient writhing in agony. It has cracks on its body from which gas is emitted and has rubber-like skin. However, if James goes back to where the first lying figure is, the way is blocked by police caution tape. And throughout the town, there are plenty of bodies that can be found that wear clothes but are lying figures underneath. With certain details in the third game, it is possible that what James is dealing with can be actual people. Or perhaps it's another trick of his mind, imagining his own death or thinking about Mary's death. The creepers, which are the roach monsters, aren't part of the 9 squares, but are more of the town's eerie creatures that appear in a few games. Though, if you wanted to find symbolism beyond a gameplay staple, both the lying figures and creepers have insect noises as they skitter and crawl around, and naturally give off a disgusting and unclean impression, which James and Mary could have felt about her hospice care. After James's journey throughout the town, he eventually gets the key to Woodside apartment off one of those lying figure corpses, which lets him cross through to the other section of town that is blocked off by inaccessible roads. While James has never been to Woodside or Blue Creek Apartments, some of the rooms start to relate to him. In room 202, there are several cages where the butterflies in the room lie dead on the bed, and there's a hole in the wall that has a green slime and a mechanical pumping noise that can be similar to a machine that helps one breathe. In the same disregard for James's safety and being used to dealing with matters he finds disgusting, he reaches deep into the hole to pull out the clock key, which, if you are stretching for a meaning, the clock can symbolize time running out on a deathbed. But Maria, the physical manifestation that torments James with sexuality, emasculation, and reminding him of the thoughts he feels most guilty about, especially with sharing the same face as Mary, she has a tattoo of a butterfly on her hip. These butterflies are the first hint of this manifesting later, and as we see in the Born from a Wish sub-scenario, Maria kind of existed to some degree, or like the title implies, was created when James enters the town for the first time. Maria reminds James so much of Mary, but is so sexually forward, much like his repression, and the fact that she's alive can symbolize the rebirth a caterpillar goes through to become a butterfly. But this also extends to the mauves that the boss variant of Mary or Maria one encounters at the end of the game, where at least these moths are less pretty than butterflies, and moths tend to degrade or cause damage to clothing. In room 205, James finds a mannequin that is wearing Mary's exact clothes, and has a flashlight nestled between its bosom. Its light shines on James, where one could see that as the spotlight turned onto him, trying to shed some light on his delusions and darkness, but if nothing else, it's his tool that will help him search throughout the darkness of this town and his manifestations. When he grabs hold of it, the new enemy known as the mannequin awakens and starts to appear through the rest of the game. They are creatures born of lust and represent his natural urges and inclinations and memories belonging to a hospital. Instead of being a full mannequin, face and all, the upper half are a second pair of legs, showing both a lack of wanting to acknowledge the identity or face when thinking of his wife or others, and replacing their face with even more sexual imagery of legs that go all the way up and down too. In room 208, the clock puzzle waits in the side room, but after grabbing the handgun in 301, James hears a cry of pain when he returns to the second floor. Before entering, James sees Pyramid Head standing behind bars, silently watching him, giving off a menacing red glow. We will go into this more in a bit, as Pyramid Head has easily become the icon for Silent Hill, despite him being a monster exclusive to James Sunderland. When James meets Pyramid Head in 307, he is abusing and torturing the mannequins in his grasp. But while the motions look erotic, it's not meant to be a sexual act. More like trying to violently dispose of them. A fun fact is the modeling for the motions in that scene came from Blue Velvet, which I believe has Dustin Hoffman enacting that scene. James tries to destroy Pyramid Head with his handgun, but trying to get rid of Pyramid Head only makes him come back later and stronger each and every time. In room 101, we find a corpse placed inside of an open fridge, with one of our other big characters, Eddie Dombrowski, vomiting into a toilet, but claims he has nothing to do with the body. Eddie is an insecure, mentally disturbed, and severely bullied young man who is self-conscious about his weight and physical appearance after being laughed at and ridiculed his entire life. He used to work part-time at a gas station. Eddie had to deal with bullying constantly, being put on his knees to beg for his life, and with how he viewed himself, may have had body dysmorphic disorder as well, and he may have developed an excessive eating disorder to cope with his troubles. A football player bully would continue to torment Eddie even after graduating high school, so in revenge, Eddie killed the bully's dog. He then followed up by shooting the football player in the knee, but not killing him, and fled town in his white van, eventually finding his way into Silent Hill because he felt the town called him there, with the darkness in his heart. Along the way, he came across Laura, who was trying to go to town as well, and gave her a ride, bringing her to the observation deck. Seeing the Pete's Bolorama sign there, he would later show up at the bowling alley. As Eddie progresses into Silent Hill, it starts to become his own personal hell, much like James and Angela, and starts seeing corpses. It's clear later that Eddie is cracked and kills the other perceived people, but he denies killing the one in the fridge. Personally, I think he did kill the first guy, as first-time killers tend to get sick after their murder, but it's just as possible that it's purely the town toying with his deep-seated desires to give retribution for all the bullying he received. When James meets Eddie, he asks if he was friends with that red pyramid thing, which would later be known as Pyramid Head. He has no idea about him, but he has seen his own weird-looking monsters, much like James and Angela. On the streets of town, there is a series of memos found by a corpse that imply that everyone perceives the monsters differently, whether they are there to begin with or have a different appearance. Much later, when James helps Angela deal with the abstract daddy, it is something conjured from the darkness in Angela's soul, but also from the newspaper article James reads about the murder incident. It is confirmed by Masahiro Ito that James is not seeing the abstract daddy the same way Angela sees it, and that it's far more horrifying and traumatic beyond what it is already, if you can imagine. On the third floor of Woodside, James has a run-in with Laura as she kicks the fire escape key away from him and stomping on his hand, clearly taking out some of her and Mary's feelings against him. I did not find this on the second playthrough, but in room 205 with the mannequin, a memo shows up called Searching for Another Conclusion. This only appears after you completed the game the first time, randomly informing the player on how to get one of the three main endings. If the memo is The Road to Tomorrow, it tries to tell you how to get the leave ending, which is what we got in the first playthrough, and is typically the happier one of the endings, but does not make it the more true one. It reads, "The first step to a healthy life is to avoid illness. That may sound obvious, but it's also very important. Instead of working to heal yourself after you're sick, it's better to avoid getting sick in the first place. Also, you have to maintain a positive, optimistic outlook on life. It's no use worrying over things that have happened in the past. You've got to get outside and play in the fresh air once in a while, instead of just sitting inside reading difficult books." If the memo is How to Be a Happy Couple, it teaches you how to get the Maria ending. It reads, "Do you really love her, in sickness and in health? If you truly love her, then you must act. It all depends on how hard you fight for her. Whatever happens, don't give up. Always try just one more time. Even though there may be hard times, never turn to another woman. And if it comes to it, you must be willing to protect her with your very life. After all, true love means a willingness to sacrifice. Be true to your heart, and with luck, things will work out in the end. Although, contrastingly, if the memo is choosing death, it teaches you how to get the in-water ending. It reads, when life is filled with nothing but despair, some people choose to end it all. I once chose that path for myself as well. At the time, I felt that I had no other choices. After I made my decision, it became the only thing binding me into this world. Sometimes I would cry to myself while thinking of the past. But mostly all I did was plan over and over again how and when I was going to kill myself. I did stupid, dangerous things. I figured it didn't matter since I was going to die anyway. So I went out of my way to invite disaster. I stopped talking to people, and it didn't bother me even when friendships grew distant. When James is done with Woodside, he uses his fire escape key to cross over into Blue Creek Apartments, where the bathroom in the apartment he's in has a backed up toilet filled to the top. If he reaches into the toilet, he won't roll up his sleeve, but he will obtain a wallet that has the code to the safe in the room. From this, we can interpret this in quite a few ways. Firstly, with James's mental state and his depression, he's plunging his hand into something that could easily give him a disease and stays on his jacket, as if he has no regard for his own safety or well-being. They don't keep the shite on his model throughout the game, but in the remake, they do keep the filth on there a lot longer. However, the other way calls back to alchemy once again, as there is a saying that comes from it that reads, "From filth it will be found." Which, if you look at this and many of the hazardous and disgusting places that James must travel to in order to reach the enlightenment he seeks, the phrase encapsulates the journey well. When James enters the side room of 109, he encounters Angela in a deep state of depression, as she contemplates the use of the knife she once killed her father and brother on herself. James tries to talk Angela out of it, but she turns it around on him, perhaps because she sees the darkness in him too, claiming it's what they deserve. At least, what she believes from her mother's past verbal abuse. But this causes James to become defensive, saying that he's not like her. This scene is iconic for many reasons, but the standout part for me is that as James denies this, he can't escape the mirror in the back of the room that captures both of them in this conversation, giving subtle nods of self-reflection that he is going through, and depending on what ending you are trying to go for, trying to stave off the thoughts James has been contemplating for some time. This is also where Angela comes back from her dark place and tries to be empathetic, asking if James found his wife, to which he expresses she's dead, but he's not crazy. At least, he thinks he's not. The complicated grief and mental blocking clearly keeping him in his delusions at this time, at least, but also serves as a way to still give some mystery to the player who doesn't know the truth just yet. As a way of keeping herself from self-harm, she gives James her knife, but is still guarded and scared of others, especially men, for what they've done to her, and leaves in shame, continuing her quest to find her mother. Also, in the previous room, on the floor, is a family picture of the Orozcos, but the picture is split in two, separating the father and brother from Angela and her mother. It's hard to see in the original game. They did bring it back for the remake, and it became a little bit more clear. I'll talk about the newspaper article regarding Walter Sullivan in Silent Hill 4 The Room when I can get to it. When James solves the coin puzzle, he gets the Linehouse key, named after Adrian Lyne, the director who made Jacob's Ladder. Shortly after, he encounters Pyramid Head sexually assaulting a lying figure, which disturbs James, but he cannot escape. And Pyramid Head brings out his great knife, which upon a detailed examination is less of a knife and more of one half of a pair of scissors. So, now let's talk about Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is a manifestation of James Sunderland's guilt and desire for punishment, existing to keep him human and help him remember his past actions. He also is an example of the id, the more dark and primal urges that tend not to be acceptable in society. If one wishes to behave as a civilized person, the id is kept in check by the ego, weighing what's right from the superego and what's wrong, and deciding how much of a person's urges should be incorporated. But when suppressed, the id can become larger over time, to the point where it might come out at an inopportune time. The form that Pyramid Head is manifested is based on the painting James saw at the Silent Hill Historical Society, The Crimson and White Banquet for the Gods, that depicts an executioner in a red hood and a possibly other executioner, or what I believe to be a high priest of the cult. In town, there's an inscription on a stone that speaks of the blood swamp, where executioners wash their tools in the water, turning it into what it became, much like this red-hooded executioner. An executioner's job is to punish and carry out judgment on the guilty. And with that in the back of James's mind, especially in his most guilty moment in life, and in the town that makes physical manifestations, especially when your main character sees degradation, rust, putrid flesh, it's not unreasonable to think the large red hood can transform into rusted metal and wearing a butcher's apron and gloves. In fact, in the other world, a lot of walls that were initially just kind of unkept turn to a fleshy texture, especially in the hospital. His helmet is also meant to be uncomfortable to wear, relating to the general suffering throughout this game, but the front panel can open to reveal a tendril-like tongue, which was inspired by the sleeping man's tentacle under his coat in the movie Jacob's Ladder. The trim of the helmet is also based on a World War II German tank, I think called the Tiger. And speaking of Jacob's Ladder, I would like to also throw my hat in the ring of Pyramid Head is not necessarily a bad guy. While he does attempt to kill James throughout the story, he tends to show up to lead James and help him progress through the story, towards the truth at the end of the game. When fighting in the stairwell, he shows that trying to resist and fight against the ugliness of whom he is futile. And when it's clear he cannot be defeated, he heads down the flooded stairway and opens its door so James can escape Blue Creek towards the side of town where Rosewater Park is. When James is on the roof of the hospital, he is thrown off by Pyramid Head after reading a suicidal patient's notebook, which can be seen as showing him how it feels to almost truly die as his health falls into the critical, nearly granting his wish, or shaking him out of his dark thoughts, as well as dropping him into a section of the hospital he couldn't reach before. He even chases James out of the hospital's lower floor and the labyrinth towards his goals at the time, but still a Punisher, is not above hurting James or killing Maria. The Great Knife is heavy and lethal, acting like a great burden for Pyramid Head and James to carry when they have to slowly drag it around. much like how Mary was a burden to James. Its resemblance to one half of Scissors is part of cut content, as there was a potential plan to give both James and Pyramid Head one half of the pair, as they are one and the same. Especially as it can be commonly believed that underneath the helmet is James's own face, but that's not confirmed. Also, as James finds the dead body in the clock room, it is of James's model in a different outfit, and throughout the town, you see lying figures sometimes wearing James's clothes, representing how James thinks about his own death.
This place isn't too safe.
To follow on Pyramid Head being both a helpful and a violent force, the inspiration for Pyramid Head's role in the story stemmed from a quote from Jacob's Ladder. I'm going to take a drink real quick.
You too, huh?
And it's also my favorite quote in the entire movie.
Just brought you here.
The only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. Your memories, your attachments, they burn them all away.
Whatever.
But they're not punishing you.
I think you better.
They're
get out.
freeing your soul. If you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace,
Be careful.
then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth. It's just a matter of how you look at it is all.
You be careful too.
End quote. Each time James encounters Pyramid Head, he becomes stronger, starting with the great knife being slow but lethal in the stairwell, then sneaking up on James and pushing him off the hospital roof. Then he loses the great knife and gains the great spear, nearly as painful, and increases his approach speed. And by the end of the game, after James murders Eddie, his second murder, two Pyramid Heads with spears meet him for the final showdown. Just as invincible, but they won't go away until James finally changes his mindset. And even then, when he gets rid of the feelings of punishment for himself, eventually the Pyramid Heads will take themselves out of the equation. And on their bodies are two objects, two eggs, one of rust and one of scarlet, which have different interpretations, I'm sure. The one I like to think of is it represents James's murders, since there are now both two Pyramid Heads judging him. We had Mary, who he killed in mercy, or at least that's what most people can believe. But it was also at the later part of her life with the disease, so she was degrading and not feeling well and looking not her best. Or just also an older murder. And then we have Eddie, who James kills recently in the freezer section before he travels across the Toluca Lake. So, with the fresher death, the egg is red. But if you wanted to also find a different meaning for this, you could see it as the red egg represents Maria and the rust egg represents Mary. Because that really depends on what kind of ending you get. Whether you get the Maria ending or if you get either the leave or in water ending. Because one is focused on Maria being the end goal, and the other two are finally getting a chance to talk to your wife after you did what you did. But either way, the eggs help you progress to finally have that confrontation with Mary or Maria. Pyramid Head also has some ties to Valtiel from Silent Hill 3, which we will talk about Valtiel when we get there. But what should not be twisted is Pyramid Head, in particular, is James's monster from his psyche, and is only meant to exist for James. There are many times that Pyramid Head is used in the Silent Hill franchise, like the movies with a slightly different design, a cheap attempt at him in Silent Hill Origins with the Butcher, literally Pyramid Head from the movie in Silent Hill Homecoming, also in the arcade game, as a common boss in Silent Hill Book of Memories, which is a PSP or PS Vita game, and in a secret joke ending in Silent Hill Downpour. But I'm not mad at that one at all. That one is great. If I can get to Downpour, I'll show the ending I'm talking about and won't spoil it. But I will say Pyramid Head and James are at least in the same room, so that's a plus. After James leaves Blue Creek, he runs into Laura, who taunts him and runs away to Pete's. The wall she sits on has a depiction of a bear and a cat, which Laura tends to depict the cat in her artwork. It can be perceived that she sees James as a big and scary man like a bear or a wolf, and the cat can just be Laura. But perhaps she draws the cat when she thinks of Mary, the nicest person to her. Afterwards, James goes to Rosewater Park, where he encounters Maria, who tries to seduce and guilt-trip James into letting her tag along. Now, Maria is an interesting case that is up for much debate, for her origins aren't the clearest, but I will at least explain what I feel is her case. When you start the game in the bathroom, there are posters of Maria, who's a dancer at Heaven's Night. This can imply she either was a person who lived in Silent Hill individually, or that she manifested in response to James returning to Silent Hill. Also, on the wall of the bathroom, there is graffiti that is supposed to represent Lilith, though the character honestly looks like it come out of a Popeye cartoon. I personally believe she is an entity conjured once James is lured by his delusions back home with memories of a life that she had not lived up to that point. With the closer James and Mary's corpse gets to the town, the more of Mary's memories start filling Maria's head. The other possibilities are, of course, is Maria just lived in the town and happened to share Mary's face and voice. But I find that unlikely because that kind of coincidence is too precise. And the other is there was a person that lived in Silent Hill initially, then transformed to resemble Mary and exists now to torment James. But while people may have darkness in their hearts, there's not a lot of evidence that the town transforms human residents, besides the possibility that one perceives the regular humans in town as the monsters they fight through the game. So, for the continuation of talking about Maria, I will be speaking as though she is a new person conjured by the town with purpose only slowly being realized the closer James gets to her. Maria is one of the 9 squares that James must deal with as he progresses through the game. Maria is a manifestation, mental construct, or figment of James's seemingly delusional imagination. Throughout the game, she will accompany James for small segments, acting as an escort quest that reminds him of his dead wife, who shares a near-identical name with her. She is defenseless. She appears in corners of the room when you enter them, and she will actively move in the way of harm, more so in the remake, but showing how much of a stressful burden she can be, and likely making James panic whenever the monsters come to try and kill her. Maria embodies many qualities of Mary, but not necessarily all at once in her life. They share a face and a voice, though not the same skull shape. She becomes flirty with James and wanting to stay with him forever. She gets terrified of death and wants James to take care of her, and she says cold, hurtful things that knock down James's ego. And, much like Mary, Maria dies, though she dies often, and tragically when able. But she also cares deeply, much like how Mary grew a bond with Laura and wanted to adopt her. Maria inexplicably wants to protect and make sure she's safe, even without meeting her. In the Born from a Wish sub-scenario, Maria starts out in her dressing room, contemplating whether to take her life with the one bullet in her revolver. to stay in her dressing room to avoid the monsters, or to venture out and try to find somebody in this terrifying town. She decides to find somebody with a revolver and a Chinese cleaver, and ends up finding the Baldwin mansion near the Blue Creek apartments, where she eventually finds a door inside that slams shut after she attempts to open it. From the other side of the door, Maria has a conversation with Ernest Baldwin, who effectively wants to be left alone, but Maria is determined to hang around. Now, unfortunately in my playthrough, the text got skipped when I tried to examine it, and it wouldn't repeat it, but when she goes into the kids' room, who we later discover is Amy Baldwin, she sees a teddy bear in the room. When she examines it, she comments that Laura would love it, and then wonders, Laura? Who am I talking about?
Yeah.
By the calendar in the room, it's also implied that it's been 10 years since the page of the calendar has changed. But as we can see, a little bit of Mary's memories are seeping into Maria, and the transformation is happening.
Sorry.
Whether that be just mental or this is now a new person.
The person you're looking for?
Maria then can find Amy Baldwin's birthday card for her father and gives it back to him, which starts to remind him of the past, and hopes that Maria can find White Chrism in Blue Creek apartment, to which he replies, I don't mind fighting for an impossible cause. Anyway, it beats just giving up and doing nothing.
I don't know why I think
The entity that Maria is unclear, of course, but if she is not exclusively the manifestation of James's desire for Mary that the town has perverted, then I would say she could be a succubus or a demon, tempting and luring James throughout the story, especially with the Lilith graffiti at the beginning of the game. And an even wilder theory, she could also be seen as a guardian angel that wants to help those in the town, namely Laura and Ernest, especially with the symbolism of the painting with the 3D hands in Brookhaven that she enters later. Again, I don't put much stock in those, but it's worth noting.
I'm not sure what I might do.
When Maria rescues the White Chrism for Ernest, she is told that James is a bad man and he's looking for the you that isn't you. She knows this to be the truth, and opens the door to find that Ernest must have been a ghost, for he was not physically in the room that has clearly been untouched for about a decade, and that painted on the outside of the house there is a sign warning that the Baldwin mansion is a haunted house. After this realization, she leaves down an alley and puts the revolver to her head, considering ending her life knowing what her purpose is now. And yet, she throws the gun over the wall where Laura's graffiti is, and meets James at Rosewater Park. The title Born from a Wish further supports that she was created to fit James's desires for his wife back, with the deeper yearning for the passion he once had with her. Mary wears modest clothes with simple pastel colors, and Maria, in stark contrast, wears maroon, crimson, and pink revealing clothes, once again, modeled after Christina Aguilera. Throughout the story, she tries to get James to love her, especially by trying to get him to forget his deceased wife and being seductive. Though until the end of the game, James only wavers when he meets her in the labyrinth for the first time. And if James receives the Maria ending by idolizing and treating Maria with the utmost care and attention. When James and Maria leave Rosewater Park, they start heading down an alley where Laura had to slip between buildings, making it impossible to catch up with her without going through Heaven's Night, which Maria has the keys to enter. While James is inside the stairwell, when examining the crate of booze, he hints to his recent alcoholism since the sickness of Mary. Ever determined, James and Maria make it to Pete's Bowlerama, where Maria makes the excuse that she hates bowling, for the reason why she won't go in. While not expressly stated, my impression has always been that Maria is James's manifestation, so no one else would be able to see her. And to avoid the complicated issue and conversation of other people unable to see her but James, she tries to stay away from interacting. After all, she's here for James, and James alone. In the bowling alley, Eddie and Laura are talking about why Eddie ran away from his hometown, and Laura calls him a gutless fatso, which certainly doesn't help his mental state after all the bullying he's gone through. But Laura is looking for Mary, and leaves shortly after James arrives, which spurs him on to try and catch up with her. Eddie, who's chowing down on some great pizza after puking his guts out, doesn't care about finding Laura in the least, especially after she was just mean to him. The line, "This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?" is many people's favorite line in the whole game. But I think it's a tie for me between that one and "You and me are the same. We aren't like other people. Don't you know that? Let's party!" The two other most memed lines come from the third game, I would say. Most of the characters' names come from famous characters and celebrities from movies or TV shows, and thus, I shall reference the creators' comments for a good amount of these things. In the initial stages of the scenario, Eddie was actually a very cheerful character. Therefore, the name was borrowed from Eddie Murphy. In the end, however, we changed his personality completely. They sure did. Eddie's last name, Dombrowski, can be a reference to Louise Dombrowski from Twin Peaks, as many references throughout the Silent Hill series come from it, including the scene of James and Maria talking in the labyrinth behind the bars. Besides being eerily similar to Mary's name, Maria could also come from Christina Aguilera's middle name. James's name is cognate to Jacob Singer's name from, of course, Jacob's Ladder, as well as wearing the same kind of jacket and outfit from the movie. For Mary, the creator's comment is, her name is taken from the victim Mary Jane Kelly in the Jack the Ripper case, who was living with the suspect Joseph Barnett as detailed in case files regarding the murders. First time I ever heard of Mary Jane Kelly's name was in a Volbeat song. That's just me, though. Her and Laura are wearing outfits from Nicolas Cage's family in Con Air. The creator's comment on Laura is, her name is taken from the non-fiction work No Language But a Cry by Richard D'Ambrosio, the story of a young girl's search for happiness while struggling to overcome the scars of abuse. The creator's comment on Angela is, her name is borrowed from the protagonist of the film The Net, which I believe is Sandra Bullock, by the way. It is also a religious name common in Spanish lineage that is derived from angel, which was a source of inspiration as well. But I will also note that while talking about Angela again, that Pyramid Head only gains the Great Knife after James receives Angela's knife, which with her and James's connection to punishment and suicide feels related. Especially because Masahiro Ito designed Pyramid Head with the in water ending in mind. Back to the story, James leaves Pete's, and Maria shows James what direction Laura went because she couldn't catch up with her. But as Laura never breathes a word of Maria, and Maria is in no scenes with anybody else in the game, that just further leads me to believe she only exists for James. And so, they all head to Brookhaven Hospital, a hospital and psychiatric ward, providing more in the medical care of Silent Hill because they have plenty of places for you to get healthy at. Inside of the hospital, James starts to see another of the 9 monsters that comes from his mind, the Bubblehead Nurses. And I would dare say that these are the most cosplayed characters from the franchise ever, along with Pyramid Head. Now, while I don't like to quote the wiki exactly all the time, I will go into what it describes the design and symbolism with, because I don't have too many differing opinions on it. So, for design and symbolism, a quote from Masahiro Ito. When I worked on designing creatures in Silent Hill 2, I really made them have their each meaning of appearance on the true reason of James's journey, because they are something like illusions from his subconscious, not only creatures to take the score. The Bubblehead Nurse is a female humanoid creature, roughly the same height as Mary Sunderland, that appears in a low-cut Brookhaven Hospital nurse uniform. Their heads are wrapped in a thin vinyl mask containing a semi-liquid mixed with thin blood, covering the surface of their face. The liquid-trapped mask gives the head a swollen appearance reminiscent of Mary's swollen head during her illness and hospitalization. The bottom center of the mask takes the shape of an infant's face, sometimes obscured by a red square covered in dried dirt or blood tied to the save points and the 9 red squares that James encounters at the end of the game. The nurses are seen constantly twitching and jittering as they suffocate and attempt to shake the liquid-filled mask from their heads. The baby face symbolizes James and Mary's desire for a child. The suffocation that the nurses experience is also representative of James's subconscious memory of smothering Mary with a pillow. The red squares covering the mouths symbolize shrieking insanity, particularly Mary's anger and verbal abuse against James. This motif was continued in Silent Hill 3. A dirtier brown-tinted variant of the nurses can be seen in the other world, wearing tattered clothing, a mask with spikes driven through it, and a protrusion coming from their back and shoulder. According to creature designer Masahiro Ito, this variant of the nurse was a last-minute addition to the game, so the symbolism behind it wavers slightly. However, it serves as a metaphor for Mary on her sickbed. Despite fan speculation, the protrusion is in no way connected to the parasite or puppet nurses from the original game. Ito clarified that the design of the nurse reflects James' subconscious and not Mary's feelings.
You could be her twin.
And now I will read some of the trivia as well.
Just your hair and
At one point in Silent Hill 2's development, the Bubblehead Nurse's face mask was intended to burst like a balloon when taking damage to the head, such as from a gunshot. Their weapon was also going to be a blood transfusion stand. Eventually, it was changed to a steel pipe as an homage to Harry Mason. Despite being a manifestation of James Sunderland's subconscious, similar monsters have appeared in Silent Hill Origins and Silent Hill Homecoming.
for Mary.
When asked why the Brookhaven Hospital nurse in Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3 are distinct from one another, Masahiro Ito replied, because they had different protagonists.
3 years ago.
However, because the Silent Hill 3 nurses are callbacks to the puppet nurses from Alyssa Gillespie's Nightmare, both red squares and Brookhaven uniforms, Ito referred to them as a cross between 1 and 2's nurses. In the E3 trailer for Silent Hill 2, Bubblehead nurses can be seen in the streets of South Vale during the Fog World segment. This was not present in the final game. Masahiro Ito drew inspiration for the design of the nurse's attire from The Exorcist 3, Jacob's Ladder, and bondage outfits. Ooh la la.
The one on the lake? I wonder if it's
James proceeds through Brookhaven, and upon entering room S3, Maria starts to cough and needs a moment to rest, implying she is feeling some of the illness that Mary felt. Maria takes some pills from a bottle that some tend to think are supposed to be PTV from the first game, but whether it is or not, it doesn't have much bearing on the story, I feel. If James checks on her multiple times in her hospital room, it will help influence the ending towards the Maria ending. One of the responses she can give to James when talking to her multiple times is asking, what will James do if he doesn't find Mary? Trying to help influence the chance he will just forget about his wife and stay with her in his own delusion. Something he will ponder as he explores, but he eventually runs into Laura, who's playing in a room, oblivious to the same sights that James is seeing, and doesn't understand his concern. When they conversate, Laura doesn't want James to yell at her, to which he promises he won't. And upon hearing that she knew Mary in the hospital last year, he lashed out aggressively, calling her a liar. Because, if what she says is true, it would break his delusions and mental barriers he's kept up through Silent Hill. Even if it could make it more likely that she could be alive if the story didn't revolve around James killing Mary. Using James's desperation for any shred of evidence that Mary could still be here, Laura lures and locks him in a room where a new red square monster shows up, the Flesh Lips. And I will quote the appearance and symbolism from the wiki on this one as well. Flesh Lip is a creature bound to a grid-like lattice with a mouth located on its abdomen. Encountered in the hospital, it represents James's memory of Mary in her sickbed. Its flesh is reminiscent of broken skin similar to Mary's disease. The lattice evokes a bed frame, and the imagery of Misty Day Remains of the Judgment, a painting that resonates with James during their vacation to Silent Hill. Mouth is a recurring motif in the creature design. Mary verbally abused James during her illness, so the mouths on the creatures represent her inner turmoil and verbal attacks. None of the monsters in Silent Hill 2 have mouths until Flesh Lip appears, after which every creature introduced has a mouth. Flesh Lips is a more abstract representation of the vision of Mary that James confronts in the game's climax. She transforms into a sickly creature that hangs upside down from a similar lattice. James knows that he should remember killing her, but actively suppresses the memory in Brookhaven Hospital. After dealing with the Flesh Lip boss fight, James is pulled onto a stretcher and is wheeled across the hospital as it transitions into the other world, with the voice of Mary calling out for James throughout. I'm going to talk about the history of Brookhaven a little bit. So, prior to the 1600s, the area where Silent Hill was eventually established was the home of members of an unnamed Native American tribe that used the land for sacred rituals. At the end of the century, settlers arrived and founded the town. Soon after, they began to rapidly die off. The deaths were attributed to an epidemic, and Brookhaven Hospital was built to treat those affected. It was originally little more than a shack, but it gradually grew. Eventually, the settlers fled the town, leaving it abandoned for nearly a century, until it was resettled as a penal colony in the 1800s. Around 1810, another epidemic broke out, and Brookhaven Hospital was rebuilt and reopened. Brookhaven Hospital was put to great use during those dark times. In the 1860s, during the American Civil War, Brookhaven Hospital was put into use as a medical hospital. The incarnation of Brookhaven in Silent Hill 2 and 3 has existed since it became large-scale in the late 1800s. Eventually, at an unspecified time, anytime after the American Civil War or in the 20th century, Brookhaven transformed from a hospital to treat the epidemic and disease to mainly a mental hospital. This is likely due to older infrastructure of the hospital, with only one elevator and narrow hallways unsuitable for emergencies. Some aspects of the hospital used to treat mental health include a garden, a pool, and a day room for recreation. We are now reaching the end of this video, but before I end it, I'm going to read some new content that you are seeing on the screen right now. Not at the same pace that it's going, so don't pay any mind to that. But, in the Book of Lost Memory, the name comes from the legend of the people whose land was stolen from them. They call this place the Place of Silent Spirits. By spirits they meant not only their dead relatives, but also the spirits that they believed inhabited the trees, the rocks, and the water around them. According to legend, this was where the holiest ceremonies took place. But it was not the ancestors of those who now live in this town that first stole the land from these people. There were others who came before. In those days, this town went by another name, but that name is now hopelessly lost in the veils of time. All we know is that there was another name, and that for some reason the town was once abandoned by its residents. This is the end of part 1. It took a long time to write this, so it might take me a long time to get part 2 out, or whatever other parts we have. But thank you for watching, and we'll talk next time.